Hey everyone, tonight we're starting with a locked door, an untouched cranberry relish, and the kind of silence that tells you something's very wrong. I had Emma's favourite sparkling cider balanced under one arm, a homemade pie under the other, and I was already imagining her laugh when she opened the door. But instead, it was Weston. That perfect smile of his didn't quite reach his eyes. "There's been a change of plans," he said. The foyer was too quiet. No scent of turkey. No music. No voices. Just that silence. What kind of change? He stepped back just enough for me to enter, but not far enough for me to get past him. "Emma's feeling under the weather. Migraine. We're keeping things small." I set the pie down carefully. "Then I'll check on her. She always liked my tea when she's not feeling well." He blocked me with a half step. "She's sleeping. Best not to disturb her." My blood started to cool in a very specific maternal way. The kind where instincts don't scream, they hum. "Weston, I'd like to see my daughter." "That's not happening today, Magnolia." Now, before you feel the same twist in your gut that I did, and trust me, it's coming. Take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you really like what I'm doing here. Post your location and your local time in the comments so I can see where we're all listening from tonight. Now, turn off the lights, maybe turn on the fan for some soft noise, and let's get started tonight. I stared at him, and for a long second I swear we were two card sharks bluffing over a kitchen table. But the thing was, I wasn't bluffing. He just didn't know it yet. "I was invited to help with Thanksgiving," I said calmly. "By Emma. I have the texts." He shrugged. "She changed her mind. I'm 62. I've raised 2 daughters, buried a husband, survived 4 recessions, and once closed a real estate deal during a tornado warning. I don't scare easy." But there was something about Weston's voice, calm, cold, a little too practiced, that made the hairs on my arms stand up. "If she changed her mind, she can tell me herself. Emma's not up for visitors." His words were like a locked door, with a chair jammed under the handle. I knew this game. It's the same one that starts with little lies. "She's not home. She's sleeping," and ends with a woman forgetting who she ever was. Actually came a soft voice behind him. "I'd love some of Grandma's tea." Emma stood in the hallway. Her robe was belted tightly around her. Eyes red. She looked dimmed. That's the only way I can say it. Like someone had reached into her and turned the brightness down. I'd raised that girl to shine, and she was flickering. Weston turned around. "Sweetheart, you should be resting." "I heard voices," she said. "Hi, Mom." I crossed to her quickly, brushing a stray strand from her face. "You do look pale. Let me make that tea." Weston didn't argue. He followed us to the kitchen like a dog guarding a bone, watching me boil water like I was about to poison him instead of steep ginger and honey. As the tea steeped, I leaned in. "What's going on?" Emma barely blinked. "He cancelled Thanksgiving, told everyone I was sick, said I didn't want to see them. And did you—" Her hands tightened around the mug. "No, I didn't want to cancel. But he said it was easier this way. Did you tell him that—" Her silence was louder than any answer. Old age wisdom, here silence is rarely agreement. It's often exhaustion in disguise. Quirky fact. In Norway, there's a town where the sun doesn't rise for 2 months. You think that's dark. Try watching your daughter pretend everything's fine while she shrinks away in front of you. Academically speaking, this is classic coercive control. Remove the witnesses, then rewrite the story. Emma sipped her tea. "He said I had to choose. Between what? His comfort or your feelings?" That's when I knew. This wasn't just about power. It was about erasing every part of Emma that didn't orbit Weston, her family, her laughter, her strength. Me. I was halfway through slicing lemons when Weston returned. "If she's feeling better," he said smoothly, "maybe you could stay for a small lunch. Just us 3. I smiled sweetly. How thoughtful. As we prepped in silence, I saw him try to reclaim the narrative. He wanted to control the temperature of the room, the story we told, the lines we spoke. But I had played this game before, only last time it was with the bank, during the 2008 crash. Weston tried to charm control correct. Emma tried to stay small. I, however, was just getting started. As we sat for our awkward three-person meal, Emma reached for the cider I'd brought and met my gaze. Her fingers trembled slightly. It was the smallest rebellion, but I saw it, and I smiled. By the end of the meal, I had made a decision. I couldn't rip Emma from his grip, but I could pry his fingers loose. As I left, I leaned in and whispered, "My door is open. Day or night." She nodded, just barely. I got in my car, drove 3 blocks, then pulled over and called my assistant. "Harold, it's Magnolia. I need you to pull the Caldwell mortgage file and set up a meeting with my lawyer." Because if Weston wanted to play games, I had just opened the rulebook. 3 years ago, if you'd told me I'd end up battling my daughter's husband like a quiet suburban warlord, I would have laughed and offered you a cinnamon roll. But back then, I was just relieved Emma had finally found someone who treated her right, or so I thought. I remember the first time she brought Weston home. She was glowing, like she'd swallowed the moon cheeks' flushed hair, swept up in that no-effort way she always had. And Weston, he looked like he stepped out of a catalogue ad for America's Most Employable Bachelor. Tailored navy suit, real leather shoes, clean shave, no cologne, just the subtle scent of ambition and control. "Mrs. Thornbuck," he said, shaking my hand. "Emma speaks so highly of you. It's an honor to finally meet the woman who raised such an extraordinary daughter." I should have been skeptical. No one uses the phrase "the woman who raised such an extraordinary daughter" unless they're selling you something. But I wasn't. I was flattered, charmed even. Old age wisdom. The most dangerous predator is the one that makes you feel safest first. He was attentive too. Not just to Emma, though. He looked at her like she'd invented color, but to all of us. He asked Olivia about her marketing job, remembered that Marcus didn't eat red meat, even laughed at my jokes, which, to be fair, are terrible. Example. What do you call a dinosaur with an extensive vocabulary? A thesaurus. Over dessert, I found myself thinking, maybe this one's different. Even Olivia, who trusts new people like most cats trust bathtubs, leaned over and whispered, "She looks happy, Mom." And she did. Eyes bright, voice musical, telling a story about a new project at the non-profit where she worked. Weston watched her like she was the only light in the room. So of course when they announced their engagement 8 months later, I cheered. At the party, I raised a glass and said, "To finding someone who sees you completely and loves every part." Emma cried. Weston kissed her temple, holding her too tightly just for a moment. Just long enough that my stomach knotted. But I told myself I was imagining things. I didn't want to be that mother. The overbearing, suspicious mother who sees trouble in every shadow. Besides, he was so supportive. Brought her flowers just because. Showed up to volunteer at her events. Said things like, "I'm just here to lift her up." Which in retrospect is such a strange phrase. Why do men always want to lift women up like we're sandbags? He even insisted on paying for their wedding venue. It should be special, he told me. She deserves that. So I offered the garden at my house. My Victorian home with wraparound porch and a white oak that had stood longer than any marriage I'd ever known. It was Emma's favorite place growing up. She said yes. That day was beautiful, truly. Wildflowers she and I arranged the night before. Soft jazz under the trees. Olivia officiated, nervous but glowing. And me? I walked Emma down the aisle because her father couldn't. "You deserve every happiness," I whispered as I placed her hand in Weston's. He smiled at me like a man accepting a gift he knew he didn't deserve. Academic studies argue that emotional abuse leaves deeper scars than physical ones because it's harder to name, harder to point to and say, "Here. This is where it hurts." But I wouldn't understand that until much later. In that moment, I was just proud of Emma, of the life I'd built from nothing, of the man I thought was going to cherish her. After the honeymoon, they bought a little house, 3-bedroom, decent yard, bad pipes. Classic fixer-upper. I offered to help with the down payment, but Weston declined. "We want to build something on our own," he said. I respected that. Too much, it turns out. 6 months later, Weston asked for help. It was during a weekend brunch. Emma was upstairs, still getting ready. Weston sat across from me at the table, stirring his coffee with unnecessary intensity. "I've been thinking," he said, "about that offer to help with the house." I raised an eyebrow. "Emma doesn't know you're asking. She'd feel guilty," he said quickly. "But I'm worried. She's stressed, Magnolia. The renovations are more than we expected." My gut whispered no, but my heart, the part of me that saw Emma glowing that first night, overrode it. "Fine," I said. "But it's a loan, not a gift. I'll draw up paperwork." He smiled. "Thank you. You're a lifesaver." Quirky detour. The most expensive spice in the world is saffron. It takes 75,000 flowers to make a single pound. Makes my interest rates seem generous, huh? We signed papers. I became their lender instead of a bank. Lower interest, more flexibility. And I told myself more peace of mind. But peace of mind is a funny thing. It's quiet. Until it's not. Emma started cancelling our lunches, then rescheduling, then not showing up at all. She stopped wearing the vintage earrings I'd given her. Said Weston thought they looked too old-fashioned. She chopped off her hair one day. The long chestnut waves she'd loved since she was 13. "Short hair is more professional?" she said, eyes darting away. "Marriage is about compromise," she added. "You taught me that." "No," I said gently. "I taught you love is about partnership. Compromise is not the same as self-erasure." But she didn't answer, so I watched, quietly, because I knew what I was looking for now. I just hoped desperately that I was wrong. The night things really began to crack was also the night I officially stopped pretending. It was the 40th anniversary of my real estate agency, something I'd built from a 1-bedroom apartment with a second-hand fax machine and a Rolodex that could barely hold 5 names. Emma helped me plan the dinner party. She picked out the tablecloths, coordinated the menu, even hand-painted the little name cards with sprigs of rosemary from my garden. She was excited. I saw it in her emails, her texts. The old Emma peeked through, but on the night itself, Emma and Weston arrived an hour late. When she stepped through the door, she looked wrong. Her smile was painted on the kind you wear at a funeral. Her eyes were red, but she said it was allergies. The only thing blooming in November was my suspicion. Weston, ever the performer, greeted everyone like nothing was amiss, laughed loud, hugged too tightly, wore a sweater so expensive I could smell the label. During dinner, he dominated the conversation. Emma would start to say something, and he'd cut in. "Actually, honey, that's not quite how it happened." The 4th time I saw Marcus, the gentlest man I know, crumple his napkin like he wanted to throw it. Then came the moment I'll never forget. We were talking about my new commercial real estate project, something I'd been nervous about until Emma suggested it last year. "It was a risk, but it paid off. I'm proud of Mom," Emma said softly. She listened to my crazy idea and ran with it. Weston barked out a laugh, not a joyful one, a sharp, cutting one. "Emma, in commercial real estate?" He patted her hand like he was rewarding a pet. "She can barely negotiate getting her coat to the dry cleaner." The table went quiet. I've seen things die in people's eyes before, but the way Emma stared down at her plate like she was trying to will herself invisible that moment was a burial. I set my fork down. "Actually," I said carefully, evenly, "Emma has one of the sharpest business instincts I've ever seen. She just chose to apply it where it matters to people, not profit." Weston's smile tightened like a tourniquet. "Of course, Magnolia. I'm sure she's brilliant at everything." Emma said nothing. She didn't lift her eyes for the rest of the meal. Academic discourse here. There's a documented link between public belittlement and long-term trauma in intimate relationships. It's not just rude, it's corrosive. Old age wisdom. You can always tell who someone is by how they treat the people they don't have to impress. After dinner, Weston left quickly, some excuse about early meetings. Emma helped me collect wine glasses like a ghost in motion. "I'll call you tomorrow," she said softly. She didn't. Instead, Olivia showed up in my kitchen the next morning with a frown and a very aggressive way of whisking eggs. "That man is poison," she said, pouring herself coffee like it had wronged her. Emma looked like a stranger. "I know," I said, "but if we push too hard, she'll retreat." Olivia slammed the whisk down. "So we just do nothing." "We wait," I said, but not idly. I called Emma later that week, asked her to meet me for lunch. Somewhere quiet. Somewhere neutral. She agreed. That was the first surprise. The second was the tears that filled her eyes the moment I asked, "Are you happy?" She didn't say anything right away, just stared at the napkin in her lap, like it might fold itself into a rescue boat and sail her away. "It's not that simple, Mom. Complicated is fine. Diminishing is not." Her voice trembled. "He criticizes everything. My cooking, my clothes, my friends. I can't spend money without asking. I don't even have access to our joint account unless he approves something." I reached across the table and took her hand. "Emma," I whispered, "that's not marriage, that's control." She looked up at me, and in that second she was 5 again, with skinned knees and her heart on her sleeve. "He's not always like that," she said. "Sometimes he's amazing, thoughtful, romantic. He leaves me notes. He buys me things." "Sweetheart," I said gently, "if he were awful all the time, you'd have left already. That's how it works. It's the cycle." "Sometimes I feel like I'm losing my mind," she admitted. "He'll deny he said something cruel. Tell me I'm remembering wrong, that I'm too sensitive." "That's gaslighting," I said flatly. "And it's abuse." Emma flinched at the word like I'd slapped her. But she didn't correct me. That was the third surprise. Quirky fact. There's a jellyfish that's biologically immortal, but even it can die if attacked. Immortality means nothing when you're trapped. Emma checked her watch. "I have to go. He'll wonder where I am." I nodded, but my heart was pounding. "Call me. Anytime. For anything." She didn't say yes, but she squeezed my hand. 2 weeks later, she called to invite me to dinner at their place. "Weston wants to apologize," she said. "He feels terrible." I wanted to believe her. I wanted to believe people could change. Spoiler alert, they can. But not like that. Not when they haven't even admitted who they really are yet. Still I went. Because love, especially mother love, is not rational. It's relentless. Their house looked beautiful. Clean. Overly clean. Emma had made chicken piccata his favorite. Weston poured wine like he was trying out for a commercial. He apologized. Sincerely. Said he'd been under stress. That it didn't excuse his behavior. I accepted, cautiously. Then he brought it up. "Magnolia, he said we were wondering if you might consider adjusting the mortgage. Maybe lower the interest rate. Possibly gift a portion of it. For the future. Family plans, you know." Emma's smile froze. Her eyes darted to him, then to me. She hadn't known. That was all I needed. I declined, politely. The rest of the night passed in a haze of fake laughter and heavy silences. But I left with something I hadn't had before: a plan. That night, after I left their house with a barely touched Tupperware of leftovers and a stomach full of dread, I didn't go straight home. Instead, I parked a few blocks away in front of Maple Ridge's one decent late-night bakery and just sat there in my car, staring at the steering wheel, watching it catch the glow of passing headlights, like it might start talking if I waited long enough. I knew what Weston was doing. He was softening the ground, playing nice, while laying the foundation for financial leverage. That gift request. That wasn't about Emma. That was about Weston wanting full control of a house that wasn't truly his, funded by a woman he couldn't stand, but needed to appease. Old age wisdom. The ones who smile the most in negotiations are usually hiding the sharpest knives. So I made a choice. Not to go to war, not yet, but to gather my soldiers. I called Harold the next morning, told him I wanted every scrap of paperwork connected to the Caldwell mortgage. tax filings, loan terms, late fees, contractor estimates, everything. He didn't ask questions. He never does. That's why he's lasted 15 years in my agency and still brings me black coffee without cream, just the way I like it. Is this about the dinner? He asked gently. It's about a pattern, I said, and I'm tired of being polite. I also called Victoria my lawyer. She's 5 feet of legal fury and wears pearls like they're battle medals. We met in her office over lunch, my folder spread out across her sleek black desk like a crime scene. I told her everything. Weston's behavior, Emma's change, the finances, the control. She took it all in, flipping pages, nodding occasionally. Technically, she said, you're still the mortgage holder, which gives you inspection rights, conditional review clauses, and if needed, the ability to modify terms with notice. In English, you can use this mortgage to get into that house, legally. That was all I needed. We drafted a formal mortgage review letter. Nothing hostile. Just official enough to make someone like Weston twitch. It cited minor payment irregularities. One payment had been 2 days late. Normally, I wouldn't care. But now, it was leverage. Quirky detour for you. The first US mortgage was issued in the late 1700s. You know what else was popular back then? Dueling. Honestly, I think some things were simpler when you could just slap a man with a glove and demand satisfaction. Anyway, I scheduled the inspection for Thursday morning at 10 a.m. I knew Weston would be home scrambling to leave for work. I knew Emma would be trying to hold it together, still unsure which side of her life to believe in. That's what abusers count on. The fog. They make everything just confusing enough that the victim starts questioning their own memories, their own instincts. So I decided to give her clarity. When Harold and I arrived, Emma answered the door. She looked put together, neat navy dress, light makeup, but there was a tightness around her eyes. That tension you get from holding your breath too long and pretending it's oxygen. Come in, she said. I made coffee. Weston wasn't there. Meetings, she explained. He couldn't reschedule. Convenient, Harold muttered. We started the inspection in the usual places: kitchen, guest rooms, living area. Harold took notes, snapping photos of renovated fixtures and trim work. But I wasn't just looking at walls. I was looking at Emma. The way she jumped slightly when I opened a drawer. The way she nervously straightened pillows that didn't need straightening. The phone that buzzed in her pocket every 5 minutes. Weston, I asked gently. She nodded. He's just checking in. He's not even here, I said. And he's still watching. She looked away. In the master bedroom, I asked to see the closet. I made it sound like routine inspection procedure. But I already knew what I was looking for. Emma opened the doors. On one side, Weston's suits, all Savile Row and smugness. Rows of expensive ties and shoes lined like trophies. On the other, Emma's things. Sparse, neutral. Blouses in beige navy grey. A single pair of heels. I remember that red coat you wore all through college, I said softly. The one with the brass buttons. She smiled faintly. He said it made me look loud. Maybe that's the point, I said. Academic sidebar. There's a term, symbolic annihilation, used in media studies. It's about how people are made invisible through absence or distortion. But I think it applies here too. Because that closet told me more about their marriage than any journal article ever could. We moved to the office, Weston's office. Emma barely entered it, she said. His private space. But I insisted. The desk, the drawers, the planner. She watched me closely as I opened the center drawer. Inside was a planner, old-fashioned leather-bound. Weston's handwriting was neat, clinical. I flipped to a random week. Dinner at La Cirque with Vanessa. On the night of Emma's non-profit gala. Did you know about this? I asked. Emma blinked. That was the night he said he had a client dinner he couldn't miss. Didn't you ask him to come with you? Yes. And, he said, it wasn't his scene. I showed her the previous page. Her gala was written in small letters. Crossed out. Her eyes filled. Maybe it was a client dinner, she whispered. Maybe. No, I said gently. That's not how partnership works. Down in the basement, Harold took his final notes. I gave Emma space until Weston showed up. He walked in like he owned the place. Of course, technically I did. He froze when he saw Harold. What's this? A mortgage inspection, I said brightly. As outlined in Section 14 of our agreement. His jaw tightened. You should have called me directly. You don't answer my calls, Weston. He turned to Emma. Why didn't you tell me she was coming? She did, I lied smoothly. It wasn't about the inspection anymore. It was about confrontation, power, reclamation. After Harold left, I asked Emma to sit down with me at the dining table. I'm proposing a change, I said, sliding a document across. To the deed. She read it. You want the house in my name. I want you to have control, real control. Weston entered the room again. Saw the paper. Saw her holding it. Absolutely not. It's not your call, I said. Not anymore. And for the first time, Emma didn't immediately look to him. She looked to me, and she nodded. It wasn't over, but it had begun. By the time we finished that impromptu sit-down at the dining table, you could have sliced the air with a butter knife and served it on a plate next to my signature cranberry scones. Weston stood stiffly, arms crossed like he was guarding a vault, his eyes flicking from the deed transfer document to Emma, like he expected her to spontaneously combust just by holding it. I don't agree to this, he said finally, voice flat and icy. I didn't even glance at him. I looked at Emma instead. You don't need his agreement to have a conversation about your own future. Old age wisdom. People who yell the loudest about control are usually terrified of losing it. Emma set the paper down slowly. I just need time to think. Weston scoffed. You're being manipulated. She's driving a wedge between us. She's giving me information, Emma corrected softly but clearly. You're the one who keeps telling me what I'm not allowed to think. That earned her a glare. A dangerous one. The kind where the face stays calm but the nostrils flare. I stood up slowly. We'll give you two some space, I told Emma, gently placing my hand on hers. Just remember, this paper doesn't mean anything unless you want it to. Weston followed me to the door like an aggressive hotel concierge. You need to stop interfering. You need to stop assuming your charm works on everyone. I said, my voice low. Emma's seeing the truth now. That doesn't go away. Back in my car, I dialed Olivia. It's starting, I said simply. God help him, she muttered. That night, Emma didn't call. She didn't text. But at exactly 2:17 a.m., my phone lit up with her name. Emma Mobile, can I come over? She didn't need to ask. When I opened the door, she was standing there in leggings and a too-thin coat, eyes swollen, lips pressed together, like she was holding something in that was trying to escape. I'm sorry, she whispered, stepping into the foyer. You never have to apologize to me, I said. Ever. She dropped her bag and broke into tears right there on the mat. And I let her. I made us chamomile tea with honey, gave her my fluffiest robe, put Fitzgerald, my cat, in the guest room so she wouldn't sneeze herself into oblivion. By the time the sun came up, she'd told me everything. He said I embarrassed him, she whispered. Said I was supposed to support his ideas, not contradict him in front of you. Then he broke my phone. Said if I couldn't be trusted to have his back, I didn't need it. My hands clenched around my tea mug. Did he? No. He's never hit me. She paused. But sometimes I wonder if I'd prefer that. At least then it would feel real. This is just words, looks, silence that goes on for days, then gifts, then silence again. Academically, we'd call that a reinforcement abuse cycle. I call it hell in a cardigan. I feel crazy, Mom, like I'm always one step behind what he's thinking. That's not you, I told her. That's by design. Over the next 3 days, Emma stayed at my house. She slept until noon, ate pancakes at odd hours, read old magazines, and cried over a story about a dog rescue ad campaign. Slowly, like a frost melting from the corners of a window, the real Emma began to emerge. She even laughed, really laughed, when Fitzgerald knocked over a glass of orange juice trying to pounce on a dust mote. Still the chaos goblin, she said, rubbing his furry head. But Sunday evening came fast. Too fast. And as she packed her things, her hands started to tremble. "He'll have calmed down by now," she said, stuffing a sweater into her tote. It was just a bad moment. "Emma," I started. "I have to try Mom. I married him, for better or worse. But worse doesn't mean being made small." "I know," but I could see it in her eyes. She was already shrinking again. She left, and I let her. Because forcing her would have just pushed her deeper under Weston's shadow. For the next 2 months, we lived in a loop. She'd disappear, then reappear. Sometimes with Weston, sometimes not. Sometimes he'd send charming texts. "We should come by for dinner. It's been too long." Other times she'd call me from the car in hushed tones, her voice cracking. "Can I stop by for a bit? Just to breathe." And then one day, 3 weeks before Thanksgiving, I got the email. Subject line, "Thornbuck Family Thanksgiving." The message was chirpy, inviting, signed "Love, Emma." But it wasn't her. The phrasing, the punctuation too formal, too cheerful. Weston's fingerprints were all over it. Still, I replied like I believed it. "Would love to come, bringing cranberry relish. Will be early to help." Emma replied, short, hesitant. "That would be lovely, Mom." Lovely, that word again. Thanksgiving morning, I put on my softest sweater and packed up all her favorites. I drove there with cautious hope, tucked somewhere between the pie and the cider. The door opened before I knocked. And just like that, we were back at the beginning. "There's been a change of plans," Weston said. Only this time I wasn't surprised. This time I knew exactly what game he was playing, and I was done playing by his rules. After that bitter Thanksgiving doorstep standoff, I went home, reheated my pie, and sat at the kitchen table staring into it like it held answers baked into the crust. It didn't, but somewhere between the crust and the whipped cream, I found my resolve. You see, I'd been playing defense for too long, responding, reacting, hoping. But Weston had just drawn the line in the sand. He wasn't just isolating Emma anymore. He was rewriting her story, erasing the people who could remind her of who she used to be. And I wasn't about to let him turn my daughter into a ghost. So I stopped being Emma's mother for a moment and became the thing I had always been best at. A tactician. Step 1, dig. I called Victoria the next morning. "If he wants war," I said, "let's not bring knives to a gunfight." She chuckled softly. "What are we looking for?" "Anything Weston doesn't want Emma to know. Let's peel back every financial layer he's got." She started with the house. Since I still technically held the mortgage note, we had legal access to request and review documents, permits, contractor quotes, bank statements tied to payments. It didn't take long. Weston had overpaid a contractor for emergency foundation repair that never happened. The man cashed the check, then vanished into drywall dust and deletion. The contractor was fake. The payment funneled into a side account. Emma didn't know. Old age wisdom. The devil doesn't just hide in the details. He bills from there. Step 2, build the map. Harold helped me make sense of the money trail. We laid it all out in my dining room, sticky notes, spreadsheets, transaction printouts, like we were solving a murder. In some ways, we were. Just not one the law could arrest. "Looks like he's been draining her joint account too," Harold said, "using it to pay off his personal credit cards. Fancy dinners, jewelry stores. For her, nope, no charges match the gifts she's mentioned. But one of them was in Chicago during that business trip weekend." I felt my stomach tighten. There it was. Control, isolation, financial abuse, and now likely infidelity. All the poisons served under the elegant tablecloth of marriage. Step 3, drop the seed. I sent Emma a care package, not a lecture, not a folder. Just a package. Inside her favorite novel, a candle she used to love in college, and a single note. "When you're ready to remember who you are, light this." 3 days later, she sent me a photo, the candle flickering, and a caption, "Can we talk?" We met at the same tea shop, where she once told me Weston was different. She looked better. Not fixed, but clearer. I found the side account she said before the tea even cooled. I stayed quiet. I confronted him. He said I was being paranoid, accused me of spying, said I'd been poisoned by you. "Were you?" She shook her head. "You just held up a mirror." She slid a folder across the table. bank printouts, texts I screen captured, photos of bruises from when he grabbed my wrist last month. I didn't react, not then, not with rage or fear or horror. I just reached for her hand. You're not alone anymore. I know. Then she asked the question I'd been waiting for. Can we get out of this? I didn't hesitate. Yes. Step 4, take the shot. Emma filed for financial separation the following week. Not divorce yet. That would be messier. But the moment she did, Weston's mask cracked. First came the pleading, the flowers, the notes, then came the fury. He showed up at my office screaming. Security had to escort him out. He sent Emma a 14-page letter accusing her of emotional abandonment and, get this, mental instability. Projection is a powerful drug. When that didn't work, he tried turning her friends against her. Told them she was spiraling, influenced by her bitter mother disrespecting marriage. But Emma had receipts now. Clarity, evidence. And most importantly, she had the courage to let the silence between them stay silent. No texts, no explanations. No, maybe this is just a phase. She moved back in with me. The first night I found her on the couch crying silently into Fitzgerald's fur. I feel like such a failure, she whispered. You're not, I said, sitting beside her. You're a survivor. She sniffed. Why didn't I see it sooner? Because love makes us hopeful. And hopeful people give chances. Quirky truth swans are known for mating for life. But if one swan is unfaithful or abusive, the other can leave. Even nature allows exits. We started rebuilding, quietly. Emma got a new phone, opened a solo bank account, found a new therapist, started sleeping through the night. Then one day she smiled, really smiled at a stupid rom-com playing in the background. It was small, but it was the beginning of a life returned. If you've ever watched someone reclaim their life, you know, it doesn't happen like a movie montage. There's no triumphant music, no tidy transformation scene, no magical moment where everything suddenly makes sense. It's slower, grittier. 1,000 small acts of resistance that don't look like much at first. But then one day you realize the fog has lifted. For Emma, the first clear moment came on a Tuesday morning over scrambled eggs. I was sipping coffee, scrolling through an online listing for a downtown property, when she walked in, phone in hand, eyes wide. He's filing a motion, she said, claiming emotional distress. Says I manipulated him. I didn't even flinch. Of course he is. Emma dropped into the chair across from me. Mum, he's accusing you of elder abuse. Said you used your financial influence to coerce him into giving up the house. Now that made me laugh. A short, bitter chuckle. Does that mean I'm officially a villain now? Old age wisdom. If you refuse to stay silent, they'll call you aggressive. If you defend your child, they'll say you're manipulative. But if they're resorting to lies, it means you're winning. Emma looked shaken. He says he'll go public, that he'll tell my board I'm unstable, that I forged documents. I leaned forward. Let him. What? Let him try. Because now we have proof. And men like Weston, they're used to power through intimidation. But the moment you show them the facts, they crumble. She didn't speak, just reached for my hand across the table. And I realized this wasn't just about leaving Weston anymore. It was about reclaiming her story. Step 5, counter the narrative. Victoria drafted our response in 2 days. Attached to it were copies of every suspicious transaction, every email trail, every whisper of his financial misconduct. And in one very organized folder, testimonials from Emma's colleagues, her therapist, and even, yes, my estate attorney confirming her mental clarity, and Weston's attempts to smear her name. We also filed a quiet inquiry into Weston's firm. Turns out several other women had left under mysterious circumstances. One HR complaint shelved and ignored used the phrase manipulative tendencies and emotional retaliation. Emma read it 3 times. I thought I was the only one, she whispered. You're never the only one, I said. You were just the only one who stayed. For now. Then came the hearing. Not a trial, just a preliminary motion hearing on the financial review. But Weston showed up with a brand new haircut, and a smug, polished attorney who probably thought we were just two hysterical women with binders full of feelings. He was wrong. Victoria walked in wearing a charcoal pantsuit sharp enough to slice egos. She laid out the case like a surgeon, clean, precise, factual. Then came Emma. Clear-eyed, calm, strong, she testified. About the silent treatment, the gaslighting, the financial sabotage. About the broken phone, the fake contractor, the forgotten version of herself. And I swear for a moment, even the court reporter stopped typing just to watch her speak. Weston's lawyer objected, claimed it was hearsay. The judge overruled it. Later in the hallway, Weston caught up with us. Emma tensed beside me. "You think this changes anything?" He hissed. "You think some folder of bank statements means you're free?" Emma stared him dead in the eye. "I don't need permission to be free, Weston. I just needed to remember I was allowed to leave." That was the moment. Not the judge's ruling. Not the paperwork. Not the evidence. It was that. The voice. The certainty. The return of her fire. Weston stormed off. We didn't follow. Step 6, restoration. It took weeks, but the court granted Emma temporary financial protection and removed Weston's name from access to their shared accounts. The house title was frozen pending further review, which meant he couldn't sell or leverage it. Then came the messages. Desperate. Pathetic. "I was wrong. I've changed. You'll ruin us both. You're nothing without me." Classic playbook charm guilt threat. Repeat. Emma didn't respond, but she printed every message. For the record, she moved back into their house, her house accompanied by a sheriff and Victoria. They changed the locks. I stood in the doorway while she walked from room to room like she was meeting an old version of herself. She paused at the bedroom closet, then flung open the doors and started pulling things out. His suits, his shoes, his books. I handed her a garbage bag. She smiled. "Let's clean house." Quirky aside. The Japanese have a word, danshari. It means letting go of things that no longer bring you joy and releasing the guilt that made you keep them. We filled 6 bags. She donated 3, burned 1, threw out the rest. By the end of the day, she was barefoot in the living room, surrounded by candles and a playlist from her college years, dancing like no one was watching. I was watching, and I cried, because that joy, that wild, unfiltered freedom that was my daughter, Emma, returned, rewritten, resurrected, and she wasn't done yet. The day Emma reclaimed her space dancing barefoot with dust in her hair and Alanis Morissette playing too loud, I stood at the threshold of her living room and realized something I hadn't allowed myself to hope for in years. She was becoming herself again. But recovery is a spiral, not a straight line. 2 days later, Weston escalated. He filed a formal countersuit alleging character defamation and intentional disruption of professional and personal stability, his words, not mine. He even tried to subpoena my financial records, painting me as a bitter mother, trying to destroy her daughter's marriage for control and legacy. Victoria rolled her eyes so hard I thought she'd sprain something. "He's flailing," she said, "and trying to drag you down with him." "Then we float," I said. "We don't sink. We don't get pulled into the mud." "But Emma," she struggled. "It's my name on those documents," she whispered one night. "Even if we prove he's lying, people will talk." "Let them," I told her. "The people worth keeping will listen. And the ones who believe him, they never really knew you anyway." But still it chipped at her. Not just the legal mudslinging, but the public unraveling of the persona she'd worked so hard to maintain. Because for years, she'd played the good wife, the smiling partner, the one who posted vacation photos while quietly erasing her own needs. Now the curtain had dropped, and all that remained was the raw, vulnerable Emma trying to stitch herself back together in full view of the world. She started therapy twice a week, started journaling again, started saying things like, "I deserve more than just not being hurt." Let that sink in. Not being hurt had been her baseline for happiness. But now the bar was higher, and Weston hated it. We learned through Victoria that he'd been calling former clients of Emma's nonprofit, suggesting she was emotionally unstable and unreliable under pressure. It backfired. One of those clients, A survivor of abuse herself, she sent Emma a letter. If you can survive someone trying to erase you and still come back stronger, I trust you to lead any project. You've already won. Emma cried when she read it. Not a messy cry. A release. I used to think strength meant enduring him, she said. Now I think it means walking away without needing to be broken first. Old age wisdom. Sometimes the real test isn't whether you can survive the storm, but whether you'll choose to leave it before it swallows you whole. Then came the media attempt. One of Weston's friends, a local blogger with a reputation for petty gossip disguised as lifestyle journalism, posted a vague piece about a respected husband being slandered by an overbearing mother-in-law and a fragile, emotionally unstable wife. No names, but enough details to make it obvious. Emma wanted to scream. I hate that people will think this, and I can't even defend myself without sounding vindictive. So we wrote a statement, together, not reactive, not angry, just honest. I've remained silent out of respect for a difficult process, but silence is not agreement. I have chosen to end my marriage because I deserve peace, autonomy, and truth. I will not shame myself for surviving. I will not apologize for leaving. It went viral. Not because it was sensational, but because it was real. Women across the city reached out. Some she knew, many she didn't. A nurse, a teacher, a woman who used to work in Weston's office and once quit after too many whispered comments and last-minute project sabotage. Each note was a thread, and slowly, Emma started weaving herself a new story, not as a victim, but as someone who finally stepped out of the shadow. And then, the financial investigation caught up to Weston. Turns out funneling money through fake contractor accounts is not only unethical, it's illegal. He wasn't charged yet. But the audit opened. His license was flagged. His firm issued a statement, Mr. Caldwell is on indefinite leave pending investigation. He showed up at Emma's door 2 nights later. She didn't let him in. Just cracked the door 2 inches. I'm going to lose everything he said. Emma didn't blink. So did I. And then I found myself again. She closed the door. Gently. Not out of rage, but out of finality. Because you don't have to slam the door when you're no longer afraid they'll follow you through it. That night, she sat beside me on the couch and said, I don't feel lighter, but I feel cleaner. I nodded. Healing isn't the weight leaving your shoulders. It's the strength to carry what remains. Quirky fact for you. In Iceland, they have a term, ad ganga I gegnum eldin. It means to walk through fire, but not to burn, to transform. That's what Emma was doing now. Not escaping, not avoiding, transforming. And I, her mother, got to witness every ember. The morning we finalized the deed transfer, Emma walked into the courthouse, wearing a navy blue blazer, soft curls falling just at her collar, and the look of someone who had finally stopped apologizing for taking up space. It wasn't armor, it was ownership. Victoria handed her the pen. You sign here, here and again at the bottom. After today, the house is yours, sole title holder. Weston's name is off it for good. Emma hesitated. Not out of fear, but wait. The way people pause before dropping the final stone they've carried for miles. She signed, and I saw it just for a flicker. Relief, like air finally reached her lungs after years underwater. When it was over, we didn't go celebrate with champagne. We got tacos, sat in the park, let the wind mess up our hair, talked about nothing and everything, because this wasn't a party moment. It was a quiet victory, and sometimes those matter more. But Weston, he wasn't done. That same afternoon, we received a notice he was contesting the deed transfer. Claimed duress. Claimed I manipulated Emma while she was mentally fragile. Claimed the house was community property, and she had no right to remove him from the title. Classic last-ditch theatrics. When power slips through their fingers, they grab at shadows. He's desperate, Victoria said. And he's trying to create confusion. It won't stick, but it'll get messy. Emma sat there silent. Then she reached into her purse, pulled out her phone, and calmly tapped out a text. You are not entitled to the life I rebuilt. Stop harassing me. I've saved every message. Your tactics are transparent. You lost me the moment you tried to break me. She hit send, blocked his number, then looked up at me. Let's go home. Not my home, not his house, hers. Step 7 sees the narrative. Emma started speaking out not in courtrooms or tabloids, but in quiet conversations that matter. With her co-workers, with her board, with women in her yoga class who had whispered, "You seem different lately." She didn't give speeches. She told stories, not of abuse, but of recovery, because the more she told her truth, the more her voice stopped shaking. The more she stopped flinching at shadows shaped like his name. She even led a workshop at her non-profit recognizing invisible control emotional abuse outside the stereotype. I sat in the back, watched her hold space for strangers, watched her light up again. And I remembered this is who she was always meant to be. Old age wisdom. Sometimes the strongest people are the ones who remembered who they were before the world tried to make them forget. Then came the email. From Weston, not to her. To me, subject line, you win. 4 words in the body. She was never yours to save. I didn't reply. Because he was wrong. She wasn't mine to save. She was hers to rescue. And she had. But I still printed it. Not to report. Not to fuel the fire. But to remind myself, when a man loses power, he often tells on himself. Then Emma got promoted. Executive director. Voted unanimously by her board. She cried in my kitchen when she found out. I thought this year would destroy me, she said. But it gave me back my voice. I baked a cake, the kind she liked when she was 10, with extra icing and sprinkles that stuck to her fingertips. We ate it with tea and laughter and the cat trying to steal a slice. And later that night, as I tucked a blanket over her legs, she looked at me and asked the question I wasn't expecting. Do you think I'll love again? I paused. Not because I didn't have an answer, but because I wanted to get it right. I think love isn't what you lost with him, I said. It's what you remembered about yourself. And yes, one day, someone may see that. But even if they don't, you have. She nodded, eyes glossy, heart open. And then she whispered, that's enough for me. Quirky fact, the lotus flower can grow in the dirtiest of waters and still bloom clean untouched. That's Emma now, blooming, not despite the mud, but because she escaped it. Count 1173, waiting for continue. Van già noi continui, ChatGPT già noi partes. The first time Emma hosted dinner at her house post-Western, everything felt different. Not just the furniture, though. She had sold nearly every piece he'd chosen, but the air. It felt breathable again. She had candles burning in the windows, soft jazz playing in the background, and a roast in the oven that made the whole place smell like memory. It reminded me of when she was 12 and insisted on cooking Thanksgiving by herself. The turkey was raw in the center. The mashed potatoes were glue. But she served it all with a grin and declared, presentation is everything. Now she wasn't pretending. She was present. Marcus came with a bottle of wine. Olivia brought a messy blackberry crumble. We sat at the new oak table she picked out second-hand, she said, but solid. I wanted something with history, she told us, not just style. She toasted the table. Then she toasted herself. To ugly beginnings that become beautiful middles. We all cheered. But later that night, as I helped her wash dishes, I noticed something on the fridge. A plain white envelope taped at the corner. What's that? I asked. She paused, looked down. That's his last letter. Weston. He had dropped it off 2 weeks prior. No contact, just a manila envelope slipped through the mail slot. I haven't opened it, she said. Don't know if I ever will. Do you want to? She shook her head. I think the story's over. But she didn't throw it away. She left it there, taped up. Not out of sentiment, not out of fear, but as a reminder of where she'd been and how far she'd come. Old age wisdom. We don't always burn the bridges we cross. Sometimes we just walk past them knowing we'll never go back. Then came the final nail. Weston's firm quietly released him. No statement, no fanfare. Just a change in staff listings, a LinkedIn update, and silence. The investigation into his contractor fraud hadn't turned criminal yet. But the financial blemishes, the ethical red flags, the internal complaints they had added up. He tried to spin it as a sabbatical. Emma didn't respond. Didn't need to, because silence is power when it's no longer tied to fear. She moved on, not in grand declarations, but in the small, powerful choices. She took a solo trip to Vermont, bought herself a pair of hiking boots, said she wanted to walk somewhere and leave no part of him behind. She redecorated the guest room into a reading lounge, adopted a senior rescue dog named Theo. One eye, arthritic knees, and a bark like a broken kazoo, but he adored her. He never tries to fix me, she joked once. Just sits next to me while I figure things out. Sometimes healing looks like paperwork. Sometimes it looks like dancing. And sometimes it looks like a grumpy dog curled at your feet while you read your first novel in peace. Then a letter arrived for me. From Weston's sister. We hadn't spoken in years. She had always kept her distance, civil but chilly. The letter was short. I wish I had believed you sooner. I saw the signs. I just didn't want them to be true. What you did for Emma, not every mother would have done. You saved her. I sat with that letter for a long time. Because the truth is, I didn't save her. I waited. I witnessed. I stood beside her until she could stand again. But the saving, that was Emma's. Quirky detour. In aviation, there's something called a dead stick landing, when a plane loses engine power and the pilot has to glide it safely to the ground. No thrust, no fuel, just instinct skill and the will to survive. That's what Emma did. And now, she's flying again. Not away from the past, but towards something real. Herself. The first time Weston's name came up in public again was at a neighborhood association meeting. One of the new members, a sharp-eyed widow who'd just moved from Chicago, leaned across the folding table and said, "Wasn't your daughter married to that real estate guy, Weston Caldwell?" Emma didn't flinch. She didn't smile, didn't wince, didn't fill the silence with a deflection. She just nodded. Yes, that chapter's closed, and went right back to discussing community garden zoning. It may sound like nothing, but to me, it was everything, because once even hearing his name would have triggered her palms to sweat her voice, to crack her shoulders, to tense, like she was about to absorb blame for something she didn't cause. But now she'd mastered the art of neutrality, not denial, just detachment. That's what healing looks like after emotional warfare, not rage, not revenge, just peace. But Weston, being who he is, wasn't done. He filed one last motion, a formal request to reclaim shared marital assets, including contributions made during the course of the home renovation process. And this one made me laugh out loud, compensation for reputational harm inflicted by public insinuation. In plain English, he wanted money. From Emma. For what? For her survival. Victoria handled it with her usual icy precision. She filed a countersuit so brutal in its financial detailing, Weston's lawyer called us privately to apologize. "This won't go to trial," he said. "It's a bluff. He doesn't want discovery." Of course he didn't, because discovery meant exposing the fraud, the coercion, the quiet theft of Emma's autonomy. Still, the court required mediation. So Emma had to sit across from Weston one last time in a sterile conference room with water pitchers and clicky pens and the weight of history on the table between them. I wasn't allowed in the room, but afterward she told me everything. He was smug at first, she said, like he thought I'd cry, or beg, or falter. "And did you—" She smiled. I wore red. That same coat, he once told her, made her look loud. I told him I don't owe you anything. Not money, not silence, not dignity. You gave all that up when you stopped treating me like a person. And what did he say? He called me cold, said I wasn't the woman he married. Old age wisdom. When a man says you've changed, he usually means you stopped letting him walk on you. That was the last time she saw him. 3 days later, he withdrew the motion. No explanation, no apology. Just vanished. He moved to another city, we heard. Started consulting. Quietly. No public-facing roles anymore. Emma didn't celebrate. She didn't even sigh with relief. She just kept going. Step 8, rebuild without apology. She took up pottery. Not because it was trendy, but because shaping something from nothing made sense to her now. The clay never argues she joked once. It just responds. Her shelves filled with crooked bowls, thick-walled mugs, imperfect vases. None of them matched. All of them were hers. She also took on new non-profit projects, bigger ones, policy work, things Weston once told her she wasn't cut out for. One night, she came home buzzing from a policy summit, dropped her bag, and said, "I pitched my mental health bill to the state rep. She wants to co-sponsor it." That was the moment I knew Emma wasn't just recovering. She was thriving. Not because of revenge, not because of court victories, but because she'd stopped needing anyone's permission to exist in full color. She even started dating again, slowly, cautiously. A kind man who ran a used bookstore and called her fierce instead of too much. He brought her coffee with cinnamon, listened more than he spoke, asked questions like, "What makes you feel safe?" and never once mentioned Weston, which in itself was a kind of miracle. One night I asked her, "Do you trust him?" She paused. "I don't know, but I trust me." That was all that mattered. And then the city announced a new community project, a women's shelter expansion funded by Emma's non-profit and a coalition of partners. They invited her to speak at the dedication. She asked me to stand with her. As she took the podium, I watched her grip the sides, not out of nerves, but anchoring. Her voice rang clear, even in the wind. She told her story, not the gruesome details, but the truth, about control disguised as care, about silence mistaken for peace, about walking away not because you're weak, but because you're finally strong enough to stop needing to be. When she finished, people stood, not just out of respect, out of recognition, because too many of them had seen themselves in her story, and for the first time they knew they weren't alone. Quirky side note, dandelions, yes, the weeds can grow in cement cracks, break through concrete, bloom in defiance. That's what Emma is now, a bloom in concrete, a life rewritten, a future no longer borrowed. 3 months after the shelter dedication, Emma got a letter in the mail, not from Weston, from a woman named Beatrice. The envelope was cream-colored, handwritten. No return address, but the script was clean and slanted elegant like someone who once practiced penmanship on linen stationery. Inside was a single page. I knew Weston years ago. We were never official, but I saw enough to recognize the pattern. "I want you to know you're not crazy. You're not alone. And you are braver than I was. Thank you for surviving out loud. Beatrice." Emma read it 3 times before handing it to me across the breakfast table. "I never met her," she said, but somehow she knew exactly what to say. I smiled. That's the power of truth. It echoes. That same week, Emma was invited to speak on a panel for women in leadership. The topic, boundaries burnout and breaking cycles. She almost said no. "I'm not a public speaker," she said, "and I'm not a therapist." "No," I replied, "you're something better. You're living proof." She said yes. The day of the event, she wore a dark green blazer, strong-rooted but soft at the edges. She opened her remarks with one simple line. "I used to think boundaries were walls. Now I know they're doors." And I finally closed the one that led back to my cage. People listened, really listened. Later, someone asked her during Q&A, "How do you forgive someone who never apologizes?" Emma paused, looked out over the room of women, some professionals, some survivors, some still halfway between silence and speech. "I don't," she said. "Not because I hate him, but because forgiveness isn't the goal. Freedom is. Old age wisdom. Not every story needs a resolution. Some just need an exit." And then, Emma's birthday came, her first without Weston in nearly a decade. She didn't want a party. Too loud, she said, too performative. Instead, she hosted a dinner. 6 people. Home-cooked food, candles, a dog snoring under the table. When it came time for the cake, Olivia insisted on a toast. "To Emma," she said, raising a glass. "Who walked through the fire and didn't just survive but made art from the ashes." Everyone clinked. Emma didn't cry. She laughed, loud, full belly, no apology. Later that night, after everyone had gone, she and I sat by the window with tea watching the streetlights flicker on. "Do you think he ever really loved me?" she asked softly. I didn't answer right away, because the truth was complicated. I think I said finally he loved the idea of you, the version he could mold, control, admire as a reflection of himself. She nodded. But not me, not the messy parts. Exactly. But the messy parts are the most real. She turned to me, eyes gentler now. You never left me. Even when I pushed you away, I knew you'd come back, I said. I just didn't know if I'd still be here to see it. We sat in silence a while. Then she said, Sometimes I think about who I'd be if I'd never met him. Someone different, I said, but not necessarily someone stronger. Quirky reflection. Kintsugi is the Japanese art of repairing broken pottery with gold, making the cracks part of the beauty. They don't try to hide the damage. They highlight it. That's what Emma was now. Not as good as new. Better. Step 9, reclaim the narrative quietly. Emma didn't write a book, didn't launch a podcast, didn't become the face of a movement. Instead, she mentored 3 women at her nonprofit. Quietly, one-on-one, no fanfare. One was leaving a toxic marriage. One had just found the courage to speak up about her boss. One didn't know what she needed yet, just that she was tired of being afraid. Emma sat with each of them, asked questions, listened more than she talked. Because the goal wasn't to lead, it was to witness. She even created a resource binder. Small things, legal aid contacts, emotional support tools, journal prompts, financial checklists. Printed them herself, spiral bound, gave them away at meetings. I just want them to feel like they're not starting from scratch, she told me, because Emma knew what it felt like to rebuild with no map. Now she was leaving breadcrumbs for others, not to follow her path, but to find their own way out of the dark. And me, I finally slept through the night. Because for the first time in years, I didn't have to worry whether my daughter was safe. She wasn't just surviving. She was building, and she was nowhere near finished. The following spring, Emma planted a garden. Not a metaphorical one, a real one. In the narrow strip of backyard, Weston once called useless dirt. She started with tomatoes, then lavender, then peonies, and finally she added a patch of forget-me-nots. They always come back, she told me, kneeling in the soil dirt under her fingernails, even after frost. There was something in the way she said it, soft, but certain. Like she was no longer trying to outrun the past. Just living beside it, knowing it wouldn't define her. One afternoon I found her sitting on the porch with a cup of mint tea and a notebook on her lap. She wasn't writing, just watching the breeze move through the petals. You okay? I asked. She nodded. It's strange, she said. I used to fill every quiet moment with worry. Now, I let it be quiet. Old age wisdom. Peace isn't always loud. Sometimes it whispers. And sometimes it waits patiently for you to stop fighting yourself. That summer, Emma got a grant. A big one. For expanding services at her nonprofit, New Counselors, a mobile outreach unit, legal advocates for women navigating financial abuse. When the check came through, she didn't celebrate with champagne. She took her team to lunch, sat in the corner booth, ordered sparkling water with lime, and paid the bill herself. Later that week, she told me I used to think I had to be loud to be taken seriously. Weston told me my ambition made people uncomfortable. Now I know he was just uncomfortable with me. Then came the message from Weston. Yes, again. This time through a third party, a former mutual friend, Sarah, who'd once invited them to dinner parties and pretended not to notice the silences between them. Sarah reached out on his behalf. He's going through a rough patch, the message said. He asked me to tell you he's sorry, that he's changed. Emma stared at the screen, then calmly replied, I hope he heals, but that chapter is closed. I've rewritten the ending. No drama. No reopening old wounds, just clarity. She blocked Sarah's number, then took Theo on a walk through the park. Because when you've reclaimed your life, you don't argue with ghosts. You just stop answering their knock. That autumn, Emma spoke at a regional summit. Not about Weston, not directly. She spoke about economic independence, about why financial control is often the first sign of abuse, not the last. Power doesn't always scream, she said. Sometimes it whispers in budget meetings and bank statements. Sometimes it signs the check, but withholds the pin. We need to teach women not just how to leave, but how to own. She got a standing ovation, but what mattered more was the woman who approached her after. Late 40s, wedding ring still on, eyes glossy. My daughter is going through it, she whispered. I didn't know how to help until today. Emma hugged her, gave her the binder, told her, "You're already helping. You stayed." Later, she told me, "I think I understand now, Mom. Why you never pushed too hard. Why you waited." I smiled. Sometimes loving someone means standing just close enough for them to reach when they're ready. And then she took me on a trip. Not far, just 2 hours north. A cabin near the lake. We drank cocoa on the porch. Watched stars fall into the black. "Do you ever regret not doing more?" she asked me, not forcing me to leave sooner. I shook my head. No, because if I had forced you, it would have been my rescue, not yours. She nodded slowly. That's what makes it stick, doesn't it? Choosing yourself. Yes, I said. That's what keeps the roots from pulling loose. Quirky aside, some trees don't grow until they've survived fire. Their seeds won't germinate without heat. Pain, then rebirth. Emma is that tree. Rooted now. Tall, quiet, unshakable. That winter she celebrated the holidays alone. Not in sadness, but in peace. She invited friends, lit candles, cooked food she liked, not food he once demanded. She mailed me a photo, her and Theo by the fire, a plate of cookies on her lap. Her face soft and open. The caption, "My favorite season, stillness." And for the first time in a long time, I didn't worry, because stillness no longer meant stagnation. It meant safety, wholeness, life rewritten quietly, beautifully on her terms. There's something about the end of a year that makes everything feel like a question mark. Where did the time go? What did I learn? Who am I now compared to who I was? For Emma, this past year had been the longest and shortest of her life. Some months felt like molasses. Others flew by in a blur of paperwork workshops and quiet evenings folding laundry in a house that finally felt like hers. We were sitting on my porch with mugs of ginger tea when she said it. "I don't think about him anymore." She didn't say it triumphantly, just plainly, like someone reporting the weather. I used to dream about him. Not nightmares, just little scenes. Him brushing his teeth, watching me tie my shoes, staring at me when I wasn't doing something the right way. She took a sip. But now nothing. It's like the film reel stopped. And I don't miss the show. That's when I knew. She wasn't just surviving him. She'd outgrown him. Old age wisdom. The opposite of love isn't hate, it's indifference. And indifference, when earned, is freedom. Emma started renovating the upstairs room, the one Weston once used as his office. She turned it into an art space, not for selling, not for showcasing, just for making watercolors, mixed media, the kind of messy, playful art she used to love as a teenager before someone told her she was wasting time. "I'm not trying to be good at it," she said, showing me a lopsided painting of a pear. "I'm just trying to enjoy it." She put it on the wall anyway, because perfection was never the goal. Presence was. Then came the phone call. From a woman named Natalie. She was helping her sister leave a long-term partner. "I found your nonprofit through a forum," she said. "And I saw your name on a podcast episode. I just wanted to say thank you." Emma sat on the floor with the phone to her ear for 20 minutes. Didn't say much. Just listened. Afterward, she looked up at me and said, "I think this is my work now. Not just running programs, but holding space." So she launched a monthly support circle. Small. No pressure to share. No expert on a stage. Just a room, a kettle, a circle of chairs. Sometimes only 2 women came. Sometimes a dozen. But they kept coming back. Because it wasn't about solving things. It was about being seen. One woman said, "This is the first place I've said his name without shaking." Another said, "I didn't leave yet. But I'm closer." Emma didn't give them steps. She gave them stillness. She gave them her. Quirky moment. One night after group, a woman brought her a tiny plant in a chipped terracotta pot. This survived my kitchen windowsill and a very bad relationship, she said. Now it's yours. It's still on Emma's shelf, leaning slightly, growing steadily, like her. Then she ran into Weston, at a grocery store of all places. She told me about it the next morning, calmly buttering toast like it wasn't a milestone. I turned the corner and there he was, hair grayer, eyes duller, same coat. Did he see you? I asked. Oh, he saw me. And he looked small, not physically, energetically. The man who once towered over her every decision now looked like someone who couldn't fill the space he once demanded. He didn't say anything, she added, just stared. And I smiled. Not for him, for me. Because that's the thing about freedom, it's quiet. It doesn't always roar. Sometimes it's just a smile in the frozen foods aisle. She didn't tell anyone else. No post, no group mention. Just let the moment pass. Let the ghost fade. Final step, reclaim the home. Spring came early this year. Emma opened the windows for the first time in weeks. A breeze danced through the curtains. She lit a new candle, put on a playlist that had nothing to do with anyone's taste but her own. Then she sat in the middle of her living room floor and whispered, I'm not waiting anymore. Not for justice, not for closure, not for someone to undo what was done. Just living. Full stop. That evening, she invited me over. We ate strawberry shortcake. Theo drooled at our feet, and Emma handed me a photo. It was her standing in her garden hair, pulled back cheeks pink from the sun, smiling. But not the smile she once gave Weston's camera. This one was real. Relaxed, rooted, radiant. Frame it, she said, because this is the one I want you to remember me by. And I did. I do. Every day. Because she didn't just survive. She returned. To herself. To joy. To a life she built without permission. And the best part, she's just getting started. The final morning of this story didn't feel like an ending. It felt like a sunrise. Quiet, subtle, unapologetically certain. Emma stood at the kitchen counter, barefoot, slicing oranges for breakfast. The smell of fresh mint from the garden wafted in through the open back door. Theo, graying more, now snoozed at her feet, with his face tucked into one paw. There was no big event that day. No court ruling. No speech. Just life. And that, I realized, was the whole point. Survival stories often end with some cinematic climax, a dramatic confrontation, a grand revenge, a triumphant moment with confetti and fanfare. But Emma's victory, it was in the ordinary. In choosing strawberries at the market without checking her phone for criticism, in reading a novel by the fireplace without someone mocking her choice of genre, in making dinner and seasoning it the way she liked, not the way someone else demanded. Her life wasn't perfect, but it was hers, unfiltered, uninterrupted, undictated. That afternoon we took a walk, just the two of us along a trail by the river that had recently thawed from winter. Emma wore a wool scarf, carried a thermos of spiced tea. As we walked, she pointed out little things, a bird nest tucked high in a branch, the first brave crocus pushing through the frost, a boy skipping stones just out of sight from his parents. I feel like I've missed so much, she said, but somehow I'm not behind. You're not, I told her. You're right on time. She stopped walking then, turned to face me. I used to believe life had milestones I had to hit. Be married by 30. Own a home. Be quiet to keep peace. Smile through discomfort. Forgive quickly. Forget completely. And now, I believe in small revolutions. She reached down and picked up a pebble. Tossed it into the river. That's one, she said. What was? Saying no without guilt. She tossed another. Keeping the painting even if it's ugly. Another. Telling someone I need space. Another. Loving the version of myself that left, not just the one who stayed. I didn't say anything, just watched her woman-daughter survivor leader reclaim her narrative one pebble at a time. Later at dusk, we sat on her porch. Theo curled beside her, snoring softly. The sky painted itself in lavender and gold. And she said something I'll never forget. I used to think being broken made me unworthy. But now I know the cracks were how the light got in. And how I found my way out. Old age wisdom. It's not the strength to hold everything together that makes us whole. It's the grace to let ourselves fall apart and still return. Final note, Weston never wrote again. Never emailed, never called, never walked back into our lives. And we never invited him to. There was no need to revisit what had already been rewritten. Because Emma didn't owe him closure. She didn't owe him understanding. She owed herself peace. And she kept it. Fiercely, quietly, daily. Quirky fact. The word resilience comes from the Latin resilia, meaning to leap back. But Emma didn't leap back. She leapt forward, toward a version of herself that had always existed buried beneath years of control, silencing, and performance. And now, she's free. Not because the world gave her permission, but because she stopped waiting for it. So if you ask me, what's the moral of this story? What's the point of surviving what nearly erased you? It's this. Sometimes the greatest revenge isn't proving them wrong. It's waking up every day in a life they no longer get to touch. A life you built, with gentle mornings, and mint from your own garden, and a dog that loves you for nothing more than the sound of your voice. Emma has that now, and it's more than enough.